All right, good morning, boys and girls. Today we're working on Module 5, Lesson 5, and we're continuing with fractions today. So in our previous lesson, we were learning about equivalent fractions. So we're going to continue with that topic today. So just to give you an example, remember that a fraction is a part of a whole. So I'm going to write that down. Fraction is a part of a whole. Remember, at any time you can pause the video to continue taking notes. So I'm going to draw a tape diagram, just as an example. I'm going to cut this into 4 parts. And then I'm going to just shade one of my parts. So based on what my model is showing, I've shaded 1 out of a total of 4 pieces. So I'd write my fraction 1/4. One part is shaded, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4 parts to the fraction. If I want to make this an equivalent fraction, I can just cut the pieces into smaller pieces. So an equivalent fraction means it's still the same amount being used, but the parts are smaller now. So you've basically taken, let's say this is like a candy bar, and you're going to eat this part of the candy bar, but maybe it's too large to eat. So you're going to cut it into smaller bite-sized pieces to make it easier to eat, but you're still eating this part of the candy bar. That hasn't really changed. All you've done is you've cut them into smaller bite-sized pieces. So in order to make this model equivalent, I could cut it into vertical sections, which is how we've been dividing our fractions when we make an equivalent fraction. But I could also divide it into one long horizontal line that's also going to give me smaller pieces. So I'm just going to cut it differently. I'm going to go horizontal from left to right. So I'm going to want to make this smaller bite-sized pieces, but I'm still going to use the same amount. And I'm going to go left to right. I'm going to kind of use this blue line to help me make sure it's straight. So now I still have the same amount shaded, but all my pieces, my sections are smaller now. So the equivalent, I now have 2 parts shaded, but there's now a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1/4 is equivalent to 2/8. So we were using our multiplication chart in the last lesson to show that 1/4 and 2/8 are equivalent. And if I find the 2 and the 8 in the same column, so it has to be the numerator and denominator must be found in the same column. Here's the 2, here's the 8. I move over to the 1's column. I'm now at 1/4, and that was originally what I started with, 1/4. And you might be noticing some patterns with our equivalent fractions. So you might be noticing that when I cut the 1/4 in half, I've doubled the numerator and the denominator. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to share today is we're going to write a sentence. So with this equivalent fraction, we're going to write a number sentence. We've been doing this as well. So 1/4 is equal to 1/8 plus 1/8. So we have 1/8 plus 1/8. So we've been doing the unit number sentences. So 1/8 plus 1/8, it's 2/8. So remember, just like when we would add the 1 plus 1, it's 2, and the denominator stays the same, but it's also equivalent to 1/4. So when we're adding fractions, our denominator doesn't change. We're just adding the numerators, but we know based on this model, the 2/8, it's the same as 1/4. We're going to write this also as a multiplication sentence. 1/4 is equal to 1/8 times, I have 2 1/8. So just like with repeated addition, we're repeating that fraction 1/8. So we repeated it once, twice. So we're multiplying it by 2. And if you remember, I said sometimes you want to put a denominator of 1 underneath the 2. As sometimes it's a little less confusing if you do it that way. So I'm going to rewrite it here. 1/4 is the same as 2/8. I'm going to put that 2/8 in there. But that equals 1/8 times 2/1. Remember that this 2/1 is still the number 2 because 2 divided by 1 is still 2. There are times when I want to give it a denominator of 1, so I don't get confused. I know I'm saying 2 times 1 is 2, 1 times 8 is 8, and 2/8 is equivalent to 1/4 because that's what we had up here. We started with 1/4. So today we are creating equivalent fractions and writing an addition sentence and a multiplication sentence to show the initial fraction we started with. Although I am going to say we are still going to be writing the equivalent fraction, so it makes sense. Like, how did we get 2 times 1/8 to be 1/4? That might not make sense to you, but you know that that's 2/8, and 2/8 is the same as a fourth. And I just want to point out a vocabulary word. So I want to kind of go back up to this one here. So we modeled a fourth, and then we modeled 2/8. These are equivalent, so they're the same amount. But I want to point out that the 1/4, it's called simplest form. So I'm going to say simplest form. So this is the new vocabulary word, simplest form. And what I mean by that is that the 1/4, there's no other way to show 1/4 using this model other than 1/4 in the largest piece. So like when I'm thinking of simplest form, I'm thinking of I want the piece to be as large as possible but still be 1/4. Well, the largest piece possible in 1/4 is 1/4. 2/8 is an equivalent fraction, but it's not simplest form because the 2/8, it's the same as a fourth, and these two pieces are now two smaller pieces, but I could combine them and make them one larger piece. So we'll come back to this word simplest form, but ultimately on your multiplication chart, when I move to my ones column and I find my numerator and denominator, that's when I know I'm at simplest form. So like we were working with 2/8. When I move over to the ones column, I'm now at 1/4. This is simplest form. So when I'm in my ones column for numerator and denominator, I'm at the simplest form. All right, so now we're going to do a couple of problems in our math workbook. So make sure you have your notes. All right, boys and girls, so now we're moving to page 31. This is module 5, lesson 5. So remember, we did start a new module about 2 weeks ago. You need to make sure that the cover of your book says module 5 so that if your page doesn't look like this, you're in the wrong module. Okay, so they're giving you a model. And then they're asking you to draw a horizontal line. So that's going from left to right. It's a horizontal line to decompose each of the rectangles into the rows because we're going to be making equivalent fractions. So let's look at A. And then they want you to do a sum. So that means we're adding unit fractions and a multiplication sentence. So we're going to do both sentences like we did in our notes in our math notebook. So first, they gave you this model here. So I'm going to outline it in my highlighter. So in letter A, they did it for you, but this was the original model. So they shaded 1 out of 1, 2, 3, 4. So that was the original model, and that's how they got 1/4. They shaded 1 out of the 4 sections. Then they told you that you're going to make 2 rows. In order to make 2 rows, because rows go left to right, you had to draw a horizontal line. So they drew the horizontal line for you. That dashed line is the horizontal line. I'm going to highlight it in pink. Kind of like it's pretty much what we exactly did on our math notebook. So they want you to create 2 rows, and then they want you to rewrite the fraction. So 1/4 is equivalent to 2/8. So it's actually the same that we did in our math notebook. And then they want you to add those 2/8. You have 1/8 plus 2/8. 1/8 plus 1/8 is 2/8. So 1/4 is the same as 1/8 plus 1/8, and that's 2/8. So they are including the equivalent fraction here. Then they want you to write as a multiplication sentence. You have 1/2 of the 1/8. So it's 2 times 1/8 is 2/8. We're going to do letter B and C together. And then tomorrow when we work on this lesson, we'll do the next page together. All right, so let's do B. They want you to create 2 rows, but first we need to name what this fraction is to start with. So we have 1 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're giving you 1/5, and they want you to make an equivalent fraction. So in order to make 2 rows, we're going to make 1 horizontal line, and now we have row 1 and row 2. So this is our first row, this is our second row. Now I'm going to rewrite this fraction. So now I have 2 shaded parts, out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, out of 10 total parts. So now I'm going to write my addition sentence. 1/5 is 1/10 plus 1/10, and that gives me that 2/10, and 2/10 and 1/5, they're equivalent. So I can write my number sentence like this. I can have the 1/5 over here and the 2/10 over here. And I'm just showing how I got 2/10. Now I'm going to make the multiplication sentence. So 1/5, so I start with what I originally started with, is 2 of the 1/10. So 2 times 1/10, and it is 2/10. So this was very similar to A. It's just we're dealing with 1/5 and 2/10. So we've made 2 rows. Rows go across. Columns go down, but rows go across. So we made 2 rows. We're going to do one more example together. This one's a little bit different because they're asking you to create more than 2 rows. They want you to create 4 rows. So we're going to do that in just a second. But first step, I'm figuring out what is this fraction. So I have one shaded part to 1, 2, 3 parts total. Now I'm going to make 4 rows. So I'm not just making 2, I'm making 4. But I can start with just making 2. And then I'm going to make, let's see, another one here and another one here. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. So 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. Now I'm going to count my shaded parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then all of my parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 1/3 is equivalent to 4/12. Now I'm going to write a number sentence. 1/3 is equal to, and I'm going to write it in 12ths. I have 1/12 plus 1/12 plus 1/12 plus 1/12, and that is 4/12. And 4/12 and 1/3 are the same. They're equivalent. It's just these are smaller bite-sized pieces versus one large piece. Now I'm going to write a multiplication sentence. 1/3 is equal to, but this time look how many 12ths I have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. So 4 times 1/12 equals 4/12. So I had 1/12 being added 4 times. So that's where I got that 4 from. Remember, repeated addition is how many times are you repeating that number? Well, I repeated it 4 times. What am I repeating? 1/12. So I still get 4/12. All right, so tomorrow we'll continue with our workbook. I'm hoping that you watch this video today because it will help you when we go to do tomorrow's lesson. Okay, have a great day. Don't forget to take a picture of your notes, not just my video. I need to see your notes so I know you watched the video. Have a great day.